Hi there. So now we're going to talk about how you find a center of rotation when it's not being rotated about the origin. So if I look here, triangle ABC is rotated 270 degrees to form DEF. If it was rotated about the origin, I would expect B to end up here. I would expect C. I would expect it to look something like, I don't know, like maybe like this if it was rotated about the origin, but it's not. It's rotated about some other point. And the question is, how do I find that point? Well, in our notes, we said there's 3 steps. First, we connect corresponding points. So what does that mean? So for example, D, where would D end up? Well, D would end up on A. F ends up on C. E ends up on B. I could do all 3, but I only have to do 2. So I'm going to connect 2 of the corresponding points. What was the next step in the notes? Well, we said we find the perpendicular bisectors of these segments that we just created. So DA, FC, we find their perpendicular bisectors. And then we said where the perpendicular bisectors intersect, that's the center of rotation. All right, so let's do steps 2 and 3 here. How do I find a perpendicular bisector to DA? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the slope of DA. And I think, all right, I see this goes down 2 and over 1, down 2 and over 1. I think to myself, I know that slope. That is a slope of -2. So in order to be perpendicular to it, the perpendicular slope is going to be +1/2. Now, that's the perpendicular part. How do I get the bisect part? Well, I've got to find the midpoint. If this is down 4 and over 2, I can just cut that in half and say I'm going to go down 2 and over 1, and that's the midpoint. You can kind of see these 2 little congruent triangles, which tell me that this has to be congruent to this. All right, so I've got my midpoint, I've got my slope. So from here, I'm going to go up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. If I'm going up and to the right, I'm going down and to the left. And once I have all those, I can then connect it with using my line tool. You would just use your straight edge. And if I do that, I get this. Now that's one of my perpendicular bisectors, but I have to find another. I have to find a perpendicular bisector of FC as well. Well, what's the slope of FC? From F, I'm going down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Hey, I know that slope. That is a slope of -1. So the perpendicular slope, 1 flipped around is just still 1, change the sign, is +1. So that's the slope. Where's the midpoint? Well, if I look at this, this is down 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the right 4. So instead of going 4 by 4, I'm going to go 2 by 2. And you can see here, if I go 2 by 2 twice, that tells me that this is congruent to this. That F, let's call it M, is congruent to MC, for example. So I've got my midpoint. It's right there at -4, -1. And I'm going to take my perpendicular slope of +1. So I'm going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Oh my gosh, I see where these are going to intersect. But just to complete it, I'll go ahead and draw it in using the line tool. And I say, okay, this must have rotated around this point right here where the 2 perpendicular bisectors intersected. My center of rotation is -2, +1.